All right, I'm going to get into a little bit of reporting and reimbursements. We'll go relatively quickly. We're running a little bit low on time, but a lot of this also is going to be provided via tutorial videos for the Heritage portal for your reporting and reimbursements. But we'll go over some of the requirements and some of the things that you can prepare for. So there's three types of reports now. Status reports that let us know what's going on with the project. Those are going to be required monthly, but they are quick check-ins about what's going on in the project, and if you have any, issues that come up or anything we need to know about. But it's also a way for us to make sure everything's moving along and to be able to anticipate what's coming. There are reimbursement requests. Those are going to be done in the Heritage portal as well, and will be done as needed. So when you have spent some of your funds, you'll put in a reimbursement request, and we allow up to 30 days, what it has been, but with the Heritage portal, I think we're going to be able to get that a little bit quicker. And then finally, there are monitoring reports that will be done after you your project, and those will be done annually, and will when you finish your project and close it out and you have the final reimbursement in hand, we'll send you a closeout letter that'll have instructions for the monitoring reports, and those as well are going to be done in the Heritage portal. This is just a screenshot of the what the status report or reimbursement report, will look like when you have access to them. Oops. Again, they'll all be done in Flex, and because we ask for everything to be done chronologically, so you would start with your oldest match first. I really recommend and hope that everybody will adopt the file name convention of 2-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, and then the vendor number. That'll help enormously in figuring out what's going on with each of the attachments. So Jay touched on it a little bit, but oops, I keep clicking. But the eligible expenses based on the RCW and the WAC that founded the program, and in the fact that we are funded by tax-exempt bonds for the capital budget, all of the expenses must be capital in nature. That means that they're intended for the acquisition, construction, or renovation of buildings or capital assets of some kind. And what that translates to in most cases, generally they're going to have a 13 or a 15-year useful life. The jargon here from the OFM capital budget guidelines basically says it needs to at least last as long as we're going to be paying the debt. So that's kind of one of the ways, but as with anything, refer to the guidelines. We put attachment or Appendix A in the guidelines this cycle to help clarify some of the eligible expenses. They are listed out in the WAC, but they do leave a lot of room for interpretation. First off is construction of new facilities or improvements to existing. Those are pretty easy. It's not that gets confused. It's when we get into some of the details, but also purchase, restoration, and preservation of historic building structures, ships, and transportation. Acquisition of unimproved property. There have been a few of these. It's not the most common, but it is allowable. And this is, again, where we get into phasing. If you're just buying the property for a future museum, that's going to be probably phase 1. And then you're going to have the following phases. So that's what I was kind of talking about earlier. Acquisition, protection, stabilization, or development of historic or archaeological sites that are culturally or historical significant. That's kind of the same as 1. There's a little bit of a distinction, but it's not important today. Physical improvement of interior facility spaces for exhibitions, programs, or preservation activities. Important distinction here is that the program does not provide funds for any part of an exhibition or education program. If you have an exhibition that is part of your application that we didn't see, we need to talk about that. There is a gray area between interpretation and exhibition and what constitutes what. And if that's something that you have in your scope of work, let's talk about that during the contracting process. I know that we're going to get a lot of questions about that. So we'll try to field those consistently. Construction-related design, architectural, and engineering expenses. This is one of the cost categories. This is your architects, your engineers, the folks that are going to put the design together before you start construction. Equipment when necessary to accomplish the project. We'll talk about the type of equipment in a little bit. And bridge loans, this is really rare. I think there's been one that I know of, but it is available if something.
And David,
oh, go ahead.
We actually do have a question about a loan in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So from Kai at Historic Seattle, if a loan is taken to fund construction, how do we report this as match, both principal and interest for the full term of the loan or just during the project? I guess that wouldn't qualify as a reimbursable expense if they're using it as match.
Right, it wouldn't be reimbursable, but they would still need to be able to document that it was paid. The last item here, number 7, retirement of operational debts nor for construction, facility improvement, or purchase loans that are incurred prior to award date of the grant or the legislative approval. And that's under ineligible projects. So we'll probably need to talk about that one offline or in a lot more detail.
Sure.
I'm reading
right.
here, so yeah, let's have a side conversation about that, because I think it only applies to probably one maybe 2 projects this round. Other ineligible projects: maintenance, routine repairs, supplies, operating, salaries, programs. Another distinction on salaries we'll talk about in a little bit. Equipment not directly related to the project. Leasing equipment or automobiles are ineligible. This is different. This is leasing for long-term use. The common practice of leasing or renting, rather, forklifts or heavy equipment to get the project done during construction is an eligible expense. Indirect cost reimbursement for basically administrative functions or indirect costs that are not eligible. Fundraising expenses. We get this question every once in a while. I think I actually have it as frequently asked later. Your staff time to apply for the grant, manage the grant, and send in reimbursements, your time for this workshop are not eligible for reimbursement or in-kind or match. That's different than if you have a staff member that's managing the actively managing the project itself. Projects completed prior to the start of biennium for which funding is made. It's again important to how you phase or how you describe the project. And then we talked about debts, the rare option or the rare item there. Oh, there it is right there. Can I count my staff's time writing the application and documenting the project? No, we just talked about that. Consumables and tools required to complete the project eligible. Depends on what they are. Consumables, knife blades, nails, sandpaper, things that are going to be used up in the construction of the project. Those are consumables that are eligible. Toilet paper, supplies that are generally more like office supplies are not eligible. Tools such as skill saws or hammers or personal tools are not eligible because there's no way to monitor that they're still part of the project, and it's too easy for them to walk away at the end of the project. This one's really common. Volunteer rate is $25 an hour. That's the national standard. But we often get asked that we have a highly skilled volunteer that's doing great work restoring windows or some feature of the project. And if that's not what they normally do as a professional, then they get counted as the volunteer rate. The way that they're gonna, and we'll go over this a little bit later too, the way that you document a professional is that they have been paid that rate in their private practice before. So that they're a professional carpenter, and they're a member of the Carpenters Union, and they've been working as a carpenter for the last 20 years, or even 2, it doesn't matter really. As long as they're a professional working in that field, they can get the standard carpenter's rate if they're donating their, or you can get their standard carpenter's rate if they're donating their time. But if they're highly talented and they don't necessarily work in that field, that's something that is just going to be their default to the standard volunteer rate of $25 an hour. I can't submit permanent exhibit installation for match or reimbursement. That's simple. It's because that's how they wrote the law. They didn't want the funds to going to exhibits as opposed to interpretation. And then what is the rule for including equipment? So from OFM, this has been a confusing one in the past, but from the OFM, the Office of Financial Management, who kind of oversees all of this, their capital budget instructions describe it as thus: built-in special purpose or other fixed equipment where such equipment is permanently affixed or connected to real property in such a manner that removal would cause damage to the real property to which it is affixed. So that's definitely an accountant talking, but it's basically built-in equipment or equipment that where if it was removed would damage the building or make it unusable for its intended purpose. If you have something specific, we can talk about that, but generally if it's built in, it's allowable. If it's not built in, it's not, is the oversimplified way of saying it. So everybody's probably familiar with the 2 types of match. Cash match is money that you've spent for the project. Essentially, that can be grants, as Jay talked about earlier, non-state governmental agencies, individuals, or corporations as donors. In-kind contributions are donations of materials, supplies, professional services, architectural designs, volunteer labor, those kind of things. These are directly from the enacting legislation, or the WAC, the Administrative Code for the program. Be accepted. All the funds for match or for reimbursement have to be documented and verifiable. Okay, so this is going to be receipts or packing slips or things like that that can document what went into the project, and that it's verifiable in the sense that you still have record of that. They cannot be included as match contributions or reimbursable expenses for any other state award. We've talked about that a few times, I think, today. Necessary and reasonable. That's, that's not really something we come across. We don't have people putting in, I don't know, $300 a square foot granite countertops very often. So it's not something that comes up. But know that it is something, it needs to be necessary, and it has to be something that a prudent person would do, not going overboard on crazy costs. There are allowable expenses that we went over that are both in the WAC and in the guidelines in Appendix A. They're provided for you in your approved budget and scope of work. I think this was a question or an item that Jay talked about earlier. If we're going to be counting it as match or reimbursing for it, it needs to have been in your application and your contract. Now, there's a little bit of leeway on the application, but it has to be in your contract. So if you have changes to your project or something comes up and you have to, adjust your plans, we understand that happens, but we need to know about it, and we'll have to do an amendment. Of course, they have to conform to the applicable laws. You're a person acting in a society of laws, you have to follow them. Then also be incurred during the period allowed for the grant cycle. There was a question about this. For this cycle, your match can go back to July 1st of 2015. And that is for in-kind or cash match, as long as it meets all of these other criteria. So when you guys are all muted, the pop quiz doesn't really work very well, but the question is, what is the start date for reimbursable expenses for this biennium? And I'll just tell you that it is.
There we go. Put it in the chat.
What?
I was gonna say we could try to put it in the chat, but, or we can just move on.
Yeah, I'll just say it. We're running on. It's the date of your contract that's full execution. It's not July 1st, 2021, and it's not 6 years ago. It's the date your contract was fully executed. You can start incurring costs that you expect to be reimbursed for. Moving on to how to document the different types of match. So in kind, there's a few different ways of doing this depending on what was documented or what was donated. Materials should come with a signed and dated invoice or a statement from the donor. That should be from the donor, not on your letterhead, not something you created and asked them to sign. And something that doesn't get brought up or come up that often, but non-cash donations of materials of any kind or equipment or whatever, of where you're claiming over $5,000, the IRS requires a qualified appraisal for that. So we want to see that as well. We're not experts on the value of building materials or boat covers or what have you. General labor is relatively easy to document. That's going to be $25 per hour on a time card. And you need to include the name, the date, the hours, and what type of work they did. Sorry, my phone's going off. Anyway, and we'll go into, I have a couple example spreadsheets here for that. Professional services is with a signed and dated invoice from the donor. This is not the same as a volunteer time card. Remember I said that professional services or somebody being paid above and beyond the volunteer rate need to be a professional in that field. So they'll need to provide an actual invoice of what they are donating, and then they can zero it out, say it's donated, use the language you want to use at the bottom, showing that zero is owed. Here's an example of a volunteer report. This is actually going to be available on the website. We're going to ask you to upload these as a summary document, so you can do one line item for your volunteers in the reporting in the Heritage portal. And then at the bottom, you'll see it says attach volunteer timesheets to this form to document volunteer hours. And this is an example. This will be available on the website as well. But this is for an individual, and it has the date they did it, or the date they volunteered, the project name, what they did, when they started, when they did, and total hours. And you'll convert those hours to the volunteer report. And then also, it's great to have a signature at the bottom, so they're certifying that they actually did this work. And and then you'll attach these timesheets to the volunteer report. So reimbursable expenses.
Hey, David, can I just jump in real quick?
Sure.
For the documentation of donated labor, we really want to see details on that. So we don't want to see it as project management or construction or something very vague like that. We really want to see, coordinated with contractor on, construction of outdoor interpretive exhibit or something like that. I mean, we really want to see the details in the sheet, because if you just have 20 lines of project management, that doesn't help us understand the work that you're donating. So just as a quick aside, we want you to be recording the volunteer labor that you're claiming in a detailed manner.
Good point. That's important. For anything, for donated labor, for donated materials, for just standard invoices, anything like that, we need to be able to, everything we need to be able to tie back to your scope of work. So we can say that we only reimbursed, or we only allowed for match what was included in the contract. It's not just any labor, any volunteer that you can do. So we need to have detailed descriptions of what work was done. Not just, for construction or project management, it actually should reference one of the elements of work that's in your contract, such as demolition in room 3A, or, down to that level, not just demo or dump run, things like that. Reimbursable expenses are going to be documented the same ways. They're going to have an invoice or a statement from the vendor saying that this was what was provided, this was the work that was done. And again, we need to be able to tie it directly to the scope of work. So if they have said per contract or per proposal, we need a copy of the contract or the proposal to go along with it, so we know what they're talking about. That's common. I have a couple examples later, but it's really common that we'll get something saying that per proposal, plumbing of some kind. Well, I didn't know this project had any plumbing. So we need to know what they were doing and how it fits into the scope of work. In addition to the invoice or statement or whatever you can provide to document the work that was done, we also need to know that it was paid. So this would be in the form of canceled checks, again, statements showing a zero balance, detailed credit card receipts, some form of showing that it was actually paid. And here's an example of one very bad and one very good invoice or form of documentation. The one on the left doesn't even have the vendor number. It's somebody typed it up in Word or something, billed to, don't know. I do like that they have number 18. This is an old style one, so I don't think we'll be using that in the Heritage portal, but the point is, there's a quantity of 1 for 4 feet, and I have no idea what that 4 foot is. I have no way to tie it back to the scope of work. It could be prop wash, it could be flight line. I have no idea what they're talking about. On the other hand, the invoice on the right has everything down to how many of what was provided and what the cost was. That's exactly what we need to see. But it also has the vendor, all their information, their website, their contractor number. It has the date, it has the invoice number, it has the billed to, and it should be the grantee. It shouldn't be a board member. Because what's going to happen is if we see that it was billed to a board member, we're going to have to come back to you and find out, well, what's the story with this? Why are board members having things sent to them or, purchased on the organization's account or whatever? Not that we're necessarily in enforcement, in an enforcement capacity, but we need to know that the organization paid for it or it was donated or what the story is behind it. So yeah, these two invoices couldn't be more different, but the one on the right is what we want to see. So just some overall topics on reimbursement. We really recommend you document all your match right at the beginning of the project. It helps it helps all of us work through any issues that may come up with documentation. If there's match that you were counting on that's not going to be able to be used, that you can at least have some time to adjust your budget or your contract. It also gets it all out of the way. So when you need money and you need to get reimbursed, all you're doing is uploading a few invoices that are completely reimbursable. Really try to do that. It saves everybody time and headache. And it also, once you know all of your match is documented and taken care of, you have no surprises down the road. Reimbursements early and often. So we do payments on the 10th and the 25th of the month. We need about 30, if you want to get paid on the 10th of August, we should have that complete reimbursement packet or complete reimbursement submittal by the 10th of July, so that we can review it. You can respond to any clarifications we have or documentation needs, and we can process it and get it turned around for you. And then again, allow 30 days. And that's just a good rule of thumb, but sometimes we'll probably beat that. And so in review, I know this is all pretty high level. We're not getting into a lot of details here, and that's because we're going to do the training video for the portal. But enter status reports monthly. Those are the status reports that are just telling us what's going on with your project. We went over ineligible and eligible expenses, If you have questions on them, reach out to us. Don't try to sneak it in. We went over documenting match and reimbursements, and packets still in there. We're not doing packets anymore, but we're filling out forms, and submit reimbursements as quick as often as you can, and then yeah, be prepared. It's very rare to get a reimbursement packet that we don't have questions or need some other form of documentation on. So we just be prepared for that. And that's why we kind of have a 30-day turnaround. And then to reiterate some of the things that we've talked about already. Well, I don't know if we have the first one, but anyway, put your contract number in all of your communications, all your emails, letters, anything like that, so that we know exactly who's contacting us. We have over 50 open projects right now. We need to be able to quickly find out what project we're talking about, and the contract number is the fastest way to do that. So please put it in the subject line of all emails. As Jay mentioned, keep the project contract lead contact info updated in the portal. If you have changes in your scope or budget, let us and DAP and the tribes know. The tribes not necessarily the budget, but let us know if there's any changes to your project. Let DAP and the tribes also. But I didn't jump in earlier, but as far as the tribal consultation, there was a question about when it's complete, and not the answer anybody wants to hear, but it's not really ever complete. You should be consulting with the tribes continuously anytime you're doing something. So you may not have received a response from them on your initial couple of letters, but your scope changes somehow, and you've got to do something differently. When you send the letter to DAP, send another letter to the tribe as well, and keep them informed of what's going on. You don't know if what changes are going to trigger something that they're going to want to review. And then, as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Ask the question before sending something in. It happens often that people want to just, send in something that they have a question about, and then it just causes everybody more time to respond to and redo the submissions. So reach out. We're here. These are both of our cell numbers because we're not at our desk very often these days. And hopefully less so, because we'll be doing a lot of site visits. But that's what I have for that, and we'll have more information on the process for uploading reimbursement requests and status reports shortly.
Great, yeah, and as David mentioned, we're planning, once we get the technical side of the Heritage Portal all ironed out with no bugs, we're gonna record our desktop and walk you through how to submit a status update, how to submit a reimbursement report, and you can just see it step by step by step, and you'll have access to that video whenever you need a refresher on how to. Hopefully it won't be too hard to remember once you do it first, but does take some getting used to the form. So I am going to steal David's share screen to share this ranking. So these will be your contract numbers. So it'll be 23-01 for Gig Harbor, for the Harbor History Museum, 23-02 for Historic Woodby. These will be your contract numbers, just so you're aware of that. And then we have a few questions. We've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll go ahead and get through as many as we can, and then any other remaining questions, and certainly any specific questions we can get to offline as well. So David Lynn is asking if they have a volunteer project manager who was a professional contractor but is now retired and his license has lapsed. Can he count his time as he would have as a professional, or is he just a base rate volunteer now?
Yeah, absolutely. They can. They can. That person can send in what they would do is send in an invoice for their time, and then cancel that out as a donation at the end, at the bottom of it. Yeah, that's no problem. And we don't have, I mean, if it comes up, we'll probably have to figure it out, but a length of time since they did that professionally. If they've been retired for 30 years, are they really up to date on it? I mean, I don't know. We'll deal with that if it comes up, but yeah, retired mix. Yeah, they're definitely eligible for the higher rate.
Great. And then we have two questions about reimbursements. Typically we send them electronically. We have you register as a vendor in the state system, and then they send you the reimbursement dollars that way. Is it possible for people to receive a check, David, or do they have to go through the vendor?
Yeah, that's the default actually. But you still have to be set up. We'll be sending out an email to those organizations that are not set up in the state as a state payee in the next week or so to get you set up, because it takes them a couple weeks to process it. But you can choose ACH or a hard copy check, whichever one you like.
Great. If we have a current award, how do we submit that if the portal isn't ready for reimbursement requests? I think with prior awards, unless you disagree, David, we'll continue with the old way. I guess until it gets up and running of submitting reimbursement.
Yeah, is this, there's a current contract that's still open?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would, the old project, any projects, it's just B23 projects. So anything in this application cycle forward will be in the portal. For older projects, you will still be doing the hard, or not hard copy, but the Excel spreadsheet workbook and emailing them, and we'll do them via DocuSign.
Great. And then dates for eligible pass match are July 1, 2015 through the application date or through the contract date. So your match has no end date per se. You can continue to add match throughout the project. So the July 1st, 2015 is just the furthest back you can go. And then you can add match up until your final reimbursement if you want. But as David said, it is really helpful to document that all up front, because you have to demonstrate that 2-to-1 match to get any grant dollars reimbursed to you. So if you document it all up front, you've got that 2 parts already documented, and we can just keep reimbursing your grant funds. But if you're reimbursing as you go, you have to make sure you have all that match in your reimbursement reports as well. So
right, we
even
can't
if
let you get beyond that 33% ratio.
Yes. Yeah, you can never get beyond that. And so even if you have it committed, if it's not, expended, essentially, it doesn't count as match until it's actually been spent, so, or donated. So that has to be in place before you can get that 33% of the grant dollars.
And I think there might have been, or I think the reason, I'm just shooting from the hip, but I think in a related question or issue would be that we have to have all the match documented. Well, you have to have all the funds documented, or the sources of funds that you're going to pay for the match, not necessarily all the work done.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
There's a little bit of difference there.
Like Lynn asked earlier, she's got the pledges, but the donations will come a little bit later.
Yeah.
Please email the slides ASAP. I will definitely do that. I will get that out today by the end of the day or first thing tomorrow, so you all have access to all the contact information, all the links and everything.
I think Rose raised her hand. I didn't see her question.
Oh,
yeah. Actually, you answered it. Someone asked the same question. It was about the matches and
Okay.
using those, because we're having the National Guard come in and do 3 weeks worth of work this summer. They did 2 weeks last year, so we'll use those 2 weeks for the match for justifying, and then we'll still use the work they do in this July, as part of the match.
Yep, you can keep adding match. And I did get a direct question from Metro Parks, which actually applies to multiple folks on this call, is that if you have a current grant open with us, you have another project you're still working on, that has to be concluded before we can sign the contract moving forward, even if it's a different building that you're working on. So Metro Parks, as an example, is a large city agency. They are working on multiple buildings, and yes, you have to finish up a previous grant contract before we will open a new one with you. And that also applies to anyone who has any other state grants open. So if you have a grant with Commerce, for instance, keep going back to that because that's typically the most common one that we see. That needs to be concluded before we can contract with you. And that is really because we want to make sure that we're not essentially double dipping on the match or basically counting match twice for the same state dollars. And that's more of an administration thing. If you're reporting to both Commerce and us at the same time, it's really difficult to actively track that. So we want to see that contract wrapped up and see that documentation for that contract before we start working with you on this one. So it's a little easier to keep track when they're both with us and we've seen the documentation before, but we just, it is policy that you have to finish your first contract before opening another one. So, and then Jeff, you've got a question.
Yeah, related to the cash to the match.
Oh, I think you went on mute. Sorry.
We have one housekeeping thing while he's.
Okay, am I back?
Okay,
Yep.
yes.
Sorry, the spacebar mechanism backfired on me. So for the match, we supplied specific documentation of the contributions, individual, date of gift, amount of gift for the match in the application. Are we submitting something in addition to that as part of this follow-up documentation, or is it just, are we resubmitting the same information? I'm a little confused there.
So I think we're talking about two different things. There's documentation we need in order for you to enter into your contract with us.
Right.
So that if you have already sent that in, that is fine. That is great. And that is
Okay.
what we need to see. In order to get reimbursement, you have to demonstrate that the match was spent somehow, so that the dollars,
Got it. Okay.
your account, or someone paid you that money, or so for the reimbursement step you do. And maybe that's the same documentation because
Sure.
they've already given you the money. But if it's for some folks, it might be a commitment now and then an actual payment when they're going for reimbursement or just before. So
Yeah, these were all dollars that were actually physically collected already.
great.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we just have to show that that has been spent.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's
Okay.
Thank you. That's a good question we didn't cover. And it does come up relatively often that some people, or sometimes somebody will think that because we put our documentation of matching funds in our application, we've already documented our match. Well, actually, sending the letter, the grant award letter from Murdoch, for example, does not show us what you spent the money on, what spent that grant money on for match in this project. So there's a difference between documenting the funds and documenting the actual work, the match.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you spent it on. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
we only required 75% during the application. And then the questionnaire that I hope everybody's filled out now asks for the final 25% if you submitted under 100%.
Well, I think I'll have to double check after we get off. We asked our technical support to help fix it so you could upload the documents. I'm not sure that's functioning quite yet.
Okay.
So if it's not, go ahead and use email. I will send out that ranked lists again via email so everyone knows their contract number, even though you don't have a copy of your contract yet, so that you can start referring to your contract number in any documentation that you're sending us now. But David is right that we do need to see that remaining 25% if you did not already send that to us before. Question, if we change the source of funds, thought it would be a loan, but then receive grants, is that a contract amendment? Yeah, that'll mean, I think it's attachment H needs to change. So, I mean, we can do that now before we do the contract, so we don't have to do an amendment later. If you already know about that change, we can just sort of update that information from what you submitted in your application. But if that happens in the life of the project in the future, then yeah, we'll need to update that. And David threw in a very important housekeeping note that it wound up that both he and I scheduled our vacations on the same week at the end of July. So the July 25th through 30th, we will both be out of the office. So be sure if you have anything urgent, for those of you who really want to get under contract quickly, we'll do our best to work with you on that before then. But it does really depend on kind of how quickly you review and respond, and certainly want to make sure you're taking the proper amount of time to have all of the proper governing entities reviewing it who are going to be held legally responsible. So, but just a heads up that we will be out that last week of July. All right, we're a little over time, but most folks stuck around, so thank you for that. As I mentioned, I will probably be chopping this video up into sections of the different sections we discussed today, and posting those on the website. I'll send y'all a link out to that as well. I will be sending all of the slides out as well. For now, I will go ahead and use the emails that you registered for this workshop with. But moving forward, definitely want to get folks logged into the portal and making sure that that primary contact person is the right person to be receiving updates and messages from us, and that the email is the one you want to be receiving information at. So that is really the one that, as we're working more in the portal, that we can assign to get reports, notifications, and get information sent to. So as I said, I'll send these slides out to the email you registered for this workshop with, but they'll also be available on the website as well. So, okay, I think we will wrap it up. Thank you, everyone. Super excited to move forward with you all, and to meet those of you I haven't met yet. There are a lot of really great projects in the hopper, or kind of already, many already in process, that we're really proud to be a part of. And we look forward to continuing working with you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.